Carly Simon recorded a song in 1972 that would become a permanent fixture in Hollywood. The most amazing guessing game in music history began when You're So Vain hit number 1. To claim it, famous men lined up. However, Carly Simon was aware of something they were not. There was more than one person in the song. 3 distinct guys, 3 distinct relationships, and 3 distinct betrayals were all at issue. Finally, after 50 years of silence, she is speaking the truth. You will be shocked by what she said regarding the true sources of inspiration. On June 25, 1943, Carly Simon was born in Manhattan while the world was at war. Her family resided in the Bronx's Riverdale neighborhood, where art and wealth coexisted. Simon & Schuster, one of the largest publishing firms in the world, was co-founded by her father, Richard L. Simon. Their house was filled with peaceful anticipation, grand piano music, and literature. The air felt more liberated on Martha's Vineyard, where they spent their summers. However, structure and image kept everything together back in New York. She attended the prestigious, artist-heavy Riverdale Country School and then Sarah Lawrence College. Carly couldn't shake the weight that weighed down all that luxury, which was molded by her family's name, her mother's, music, secrets, and her own private scars. Strange things happened to the family. A younger man hired to tutor Carly's younger brother, Peter, had an affair with her mother, Andrea. Instead of living in the home like a second husband, the man was meant to be a teacher. He was referred to by Carly as both a destroyer and a lover. Her dad remained silent. No one intervened to stop it. Carly was both young enough to be offended by it and old enough to comprehend. The home was altered. The man did not leave. Andrea didn't keep it a secret, and Richard's silence exacerbated the situation. It was most felt by the kids. Carly saw the walls surrounding her early years crumble. The home was hollowed out by the affair, she subsequently claimed. She carried that with her forever. Then a terrible incident occurred. When Carly was 7 years old in the summer of 1950, Billy, a 16-year-old family visitor, attacked her. He came from out of town and was older. Skinny dipping was the first step. It then proceeded to a place where children shouldn't be taken. He mistreated her in a pool house shower. For a number of summers, the discomfort resurfaced. When Carly told her sisters, they didn't think she was telling the truth. They believed she was attempting to mature. Billy was only sent away for a month after her mother learned about it. After then, nobody in the family discussed it. Carly was left with a stutter and an overwhelming sense of humiliation. It changed everything, she stated afterwards. How she loved, trusted, and wrote. Carly managed to breathe at the age of 10. She began penning poems and songs. Beethoven and Chopin were frequently performed by her father on the piano, and the music permeated their family like a second language. Taking a ukulele from her jazz-loving uncle, she started creating music out of her inner pain. Although the lyrics flowed, the words were difficult to utter aloud. The page was not reached by her stammer. She gravitated toward rhythm because of her dyslexia. Her early writing served as a lifeline. What started out as silence eventually became the voice that people heard on radios all throughout the world. But she never had an easy time defining herself. Her father was a Jew from Germany. Her mother claimed Spanish and Moorish descent and was a Catholic with Cuban roots. That opinion persisted until Carly underwent a DNA test on the television program Finding Your Roots in 2017. It turned out that Carly was 10% African and 2% Native American because her maternal grandmother was 40% African. She was taken aback by the news. It called into question her self-perception. Her grandmother's records in Cuba were traced by the show, demonstrating her African-Cuban heritage. Carly was extremely shaken by it. She continued that theme in her later songs, which featured words about honesty, blood, and belonging. Richard, her father, passed away unexpectedly from a heart attack in 1960. He was just 61. Carly was only 16. It happened 2 years after the house was ripped apart by her mother's affair. Death wasn't the only source of grief. It resulted from all they didn't say to each other. The loss was devastating, she said. Despite his brilliance, he had become emotionally aloof and was now no longer with us. Later, his absence was like a covert chorus in Carly's songs. She persisted in trying to complete the connection they were never able to make. Carly and her sister Lucy founded the Simon Sisters in 1963. They took up guitars and began singing folk tunes. They signed with Cap Records in a matter of months. They even appeared on the brief ABC series Hootenanny. At the age of 20, Carly's first album, Meet the Simon Sisters, was released in 1964. Winkin', Blinkin', and Nod was one of the songs that peaked at number 73 on the Billboard Hot 100. Like Hope and Remembrance, their voices mixed. They recorded 3 albums while touring small venues in matching outfits. Then Lucy got married and left the group. Carly remained. Sadness followed her over the years, but the songs never stopped. Cancer claimed the lives of all of her siblings. At the age of 85, Joanna died of thyroid cancer. Lucy, who was 82 years old, passed away from breast cancer just 1 day later. Photographer Peter, their younger brother, passed away in 2018 after cardiac arrest following lung cancer. Carly became Richard and Andrea Simon's sole surviving child. Every sibling had made a career out of the arts. Joanna performed opera. Broadway music was composed by Lucy. Peter took pictures of Martha's Vineyard life. One by one, Carly saw them all vanish. She was raised in a mixed-faith household where confusion was loud and God was quiet. Her mother marched for justice and was an advocate for civil rights. However, there was frequently a lack of emotional warmth. Carly was unsure of her faith as a child. The house was quiet, her mother was aloof, and her father was depressed. She left religion as she grew older, but she didn't abandon purpose. Her songs struggled with identity, loss, and belief. Her music was always fueled by a spiritual need. There was always Martha's Vineyard. It was more than a summertime destination. The Simon family went back there year after year. She also met James Taylor there. She saw him on the cover of Time in 1971, after having first seen him as a child. "I'm going to marry that man." She followed through on her vow. In 1972, they got married. Even after they broke up, the islands served as their haven. Carly used a house she dubbed Hidden Star Hill to write a large portion of her biography, Boys in the Trees. Her writing was infused with the history, the solitude, and the ocean. Things kept shattering and rebuilding back in New York. The household remained chilly despite the purpose her mother's political activity brought. There were moments when Carly felt invisible. She wrote songs about her loneliness. Her therapy became music. Her tale was contained in each piano note. In the early 1960s, she attended Sarah Lawrence, but she left quickly. She went to play music with Lucy. The family was taken aback. Carly left academia for coffee shops in the Greenwich Village. The folk scene was unpolished and untidy. She was a perfect fit. She bid privilege farewell and greeted risk. It was worthwhile. In 1966, the Simon Sisters published Cuddlebug. Their music was gentle and reflective. Lucy went out. Carly was by herself. She performed at venues like the Bitter End, but she was plagued by stage nervousness. She passed out in terror at a performance in Pittsburgh in the late 1960s. She stammered again. She occasionally performed with tranquilizers. Even yet, she occasionally struggled to manage her panic. She attempted to go solo in 1966. She was taken on by Bob Dylan's manager, Albert Gman. She recorded with the band, but the producer went too far with her. He moved. "No," Carly answered. "I'm greener than that." She turned to leave. The lesson persisted even after the music was put away. Never give your life to someone else. Then Jacob Mann appeared. Her demos were heard by him. He had faith in her. It was the first song on her debut album and peaked at number 10 on the Billboard Hot 100. They wrote, "That's the way I've always heard it should be." She was nominated for a Grammy for it in 1971. It was uncooked. She owned it. Carly held a variety of jobs prior to her stardom. She was a model. She almost made it. It almost ended because of her stage nervousness. She nearly gave up in 1968, but she persisted. She continued. Jack Holtzman, the founder of Elektra Records, then signed her in 1970. Alone was one of the songs he had heard in a live demo. It struck him. She had something, he knew. In 1971, Carly released her debut album, which peaked at number 30 on the Billboard 200. Carly Simon's self-titled debut album brought her to the public's attention on February 9, 1971. In just 4 days, she recorded it. The finances were tight. There wasn't much time. However, the songs were sung from the bottom of her heart. Therapy and Late-Night Loneliness gave rise to one of them, Alone, which struck a deep chord with anybody who had ever felt invisible. On the Billboard 200, the album rose at number 30. That was significant for a female solo performer without ostentatious advertising. That record was purchased by more than 500,000 individuals. That was important. It had significance. People were drawn in by the unvarnished honesty, particularly ladies who weren't accustomed to hearing their own suffering reflected in popular song. The spark that ignited everything then appeared. Not only did her debut hit, "That's the Way I've Always Heard It Should Be," raise questions about marriage. It held the entire concept up to the light by grabbing it by the collar. In 1971, few people ventured to say what it did. It was banned by certain radio stations. Others repeatedly played it. On the Billboard Hot 100, it peaked at number 10. People argued over it, discussed it, and committed every line to memory. People were afraid of what she and Jacob Mann had written because it was so daring. And it was motivated by that fear. Carly was more than a voice all of a sudden. By being honest, she was a radical movement. The truth continued to pursue her. She took home the Grammy for Best New Artist in 1972. It ought to have been a happy time. However, her body betrayed her on that platform. Her lips dried up and her hands shuddered. Panic set in. She could hardly talk as the audience applauded. Later on, she described it as one of the most terrifying experiences of her life. Nobody noticed her ongoing nervousness, the pressure to perform, or the conflict between her fear and her talent while she was in the spotlight. The world continued to observe, and winning seemed like a crown of thorns. She almost died that year. After a breakup, she was devastated and turned to CODs. A handful, not just one or two. They discovered her unconscious. They came to her rescue just in time. She didn't sugarcoat it in Boys in the Trees, her book. She revealed to the public just how close she was to going missing. Her growing notoriety did not protect her from suffering. It was becoming worse. It wasn't helpful to tour with crazy performers like Cat Stevens. Her peaceful melancholy juxtaposed with the glitz. However, something was broken by that encounter with death. Her music began to get teeth after that. Shadows were born by it. The dispute between her and Elektra Records grew louder in the studio. Executives pushed for quick wins. Carly resisted. She broke a guitar in the studio one day. It was a form of resistance, not anger. She was not going to turn into a puppet. Her fingerprints were still all over the songs on that record, despite some commercial compromise. The struggle behind the chords was palpable. The music was more authentic because of the tension and the refusal to fake it. Despite selling 500,000 copies of her debut record, Carly still felt out of place. Lies were whispered into her ears by childhood trauma. That this wouldn't last, that she wasn't good enough. However, admirers continued to attend because of the pain more than the glitz. Her voice resonated with them. The weight of it was always there, but she was getting up. Next up was No Secrets. November 28, 1972. It wasn't a simple sale. It blew up. It spent 5 weeks at the top of the Billboard 200. It became platinum in less than a year. There were three big hits. One that would rock popular culture for decades: Anticipation and The Right Thing to Do. You're Really Conceited. In January 1973, You're So Vain peaked at number 1 and remained there for 3 weeks. More than 1 million singles were sold. That song's mystery was priceless. Who was it about? Bowie, Mick Jagger, and Warren Beatty. For years, many speculated. Uncredited, Jagger's voice was heard on the song supporting her. Carly acknowledged in 2015 that Beatty was the subject of the third verse. She was with him at a real boat party when he threw his hat, and she felt like she was lost in the clamor of celebrity. In addition to being witty, the line, "I had some dreams, they were clouds in my coffee," was genuine, and others sensed it. In 1974, she received 3 Grammy nominations for that song. She took home the award for Best Female Pop Vocal Performance. But once more, there was a cost to the sparkle. Sleeplessness was brought on by the attention. She resumed her therapy. She had to give up parts of herself to the world in order to become a cultural icon. Her music reflected that suffering. She wasn't being saved by fame. She was getting tired of it. There was mayhem behind no secret studio wizardry. Like it was air, musicians were snorting cocaine. It was all over. Carly saw it destroy people, but she didn't use it. She witnessed the depletion of talent caused by addiction. She was altered by the encounter. When everyone else was shouting yes, she was one of the few who voiced her disagreement. She gained insight and more material to write about as a result. The Correct Thing to Do was making its way up the charts by the end of 1972. It caught something uncommon and made it to the top 20. The delicacy of fresh love without acting as though it was simple. James Taylor was that love. They were married in Paul Simon's Manhattan apartment on November 3 of that year. They revealed it to the world the following evening at Taylor's performance at Radio City Music Hall. Carly told her sister, "I'm going to marry that man," after seeing James in Time magazine. They had an electrifying chemistry. They too had problems. Sarah Maria, their daughter, was born in January 1974. Taylor immediately admitted to using heroin once more. In front of Carly, he flushed the medications down the toilet. However, it was short-lived. Music addiction returned. The emotional upheavals, the breakdowns, and the ongoing anxiety. Living in a roller coaster, as Carly put it. They laughed on some days and barely made it on others. Carly was still recording and pregnant that year. On January 11, 1974, Hotcakes debuted and quickly rose to number 3 on the Billboard 200. She was clearly pregnant, as seen on the cover. It was stunning and audacious. Taylor's duet, Mockingbird, went on to become a top 5 hit. The song Haven't Got Time for the Pain peaked at number 2 on the adult contemporary chart and number 14 on the Hot 100. She was breaking records while juggling parenthood and a failing music marriage. However, things deteriorated. She discovered James' infidelity in 1975. The truth was exposed by a health scare. She became enraged and had her own affair, but it didn't make things better. Taylor was seeing several other ladies. One of them was confronted by Carly at a rehearsal apartment. The woman informed her that James didn't love her, made fun of her appearance, and ridiculed her. Carly departed raw and shaken. The betrayal was profound. Her marriage was falling apart. When Taylor's Highway Companion was released in 1976, nobody seemed to care. It was not a good chart. His drinking got worse. They visited a therapist. She discovered the exact number of women there. The final thread broke. Both in real life and on paper, their friendship was deteriorating. They released Music, Torch, a live album full of passion, in 1977. However, violence erupted behind the curtain. Carly tried to smash a guitar over Taylor's head during one of their fights. She missed, but she never forgot that particular moment. It was more than simply anger. The issue was one of desperation. The sound of two persons publicly burning out can be heard on that CD. She recorded Nobody Does It Better for the James Bond movie The Spy Who Loved Me that same year. It turned into her biggest hit abroad. On the Billboard Hot 100, number 2. At the top of the adult contemporary chart for 7 weeks. More than 2 million copies were sold. Oscar, Golden Globe, and Grammy nominations. Bond gained a distinct advantage with her powerful and seductive voice. She owned the theme, not just sang it. At that moment, a long-forgotten recollection came back. She had met Sean Connery aboard a ship sailing from England to New York in 1965 with her sister Lucy. They were invited to his suite. Dancing and drinking. Then the threesome proposal was made. No, Carly answered. Lucy didn't. The impact of that night did not diminish. The Simon sister sandwich made an impression, even though Carly later made fun of it. Some claim that You're So Vain was influenced by memory. She published Boys in the Trees in 1978. It achieved platinum status. You Belong to Me peaked at number 6. Then came 2 more singles. With a blend of jazz, soul, and pop, the sound was fuller. However, it was a difficult year. Taylor's relapse, the persistent tug of love and grief, and a near-miss miscarriage. Her lyrics become more incisive. Haunting and Tranquilo were haunting songs. The title track was profound. It was more than just music. It was survival. She attended Madison Square Garden's No Nukes concerts in September 1979. Taylor, Springsteen, and others stood alongside her. More than $500,000 was raised for anti-nuclear causes by the event. You're So Vain and You Belong to Me was performed by Carly. But she was afraid of the stage. Part of the set was lip-synced by her. She later acknowledged it. The illusion was not as important as the truth. In 1983, Carly Simon filed for divorce from James Taylor, but the legal drama didn't stop there. The custody dispute that ensued emotionally devastated her. Even though James' drug addiction and unpredictable conduct were already well known, Carly still had to put up a strong battle for her children. She said she was hollowed out when she eventually gained custody after the protracted judicial proceedings lasted for months. Her songs carried the same emotional weight. Her song Come Upstairs peaked at number 36 on the Billboard 200 in 1980. Jessie, who is single, achieved number 11 and conveyed the agonizing loneliness of a mother attempting to maintain her strength. The songs were more than just catchy tunes. They mirrored all she was silently going through. She later said that she felt adrift during those years, torn between motherhood and the need to remain relevant in the industry, despite the album's mediocre commercial success. That entire period altered the tone of her songs and deeply etched itself into her public persona. Then a new chapter began. She wed James Hart in 1987. Their love began discreetly on Martha's Vineyard, where he was a poet. At last, Carly felt secure once more. She relied on Hart at the highs and lows of her career over their nearly 2 decades of dating. However, he came out as bisexual to her in 2007. The news caught her off guard because they had never addressed it. She claimed that it rattled her in a similar manner to how her parents' failing marriage had plagued her as a child. The split wasn't the only thing. It was that painful sense of history being repeated and betrayal. She acknowledged that she felt totally lost at the same time, and her health was also deteriorating. However, she chose to discuss it rather than keep it to herself, allowing the suffering to become a part of the narrative she conveyed through her interviews and music. She penned and released Let the River Run for Working Girl in 1988, just as her name was beginning to fade from the charts. On the Billboard Hot 100, it failed to reach the top spot. At 46, it came to an end. However, it earned her a Golden Globe, a Grammy, and an Oscar in the same year. With just one song, she became the first to achieve the Triple Crown. Her career took off after receiving the honors. That song became into more than just a soundtrack track. It became a resilience anthem. She was also revitalized by that energy. However, not every story was one of a return. She had a diagnosis of vocal nodes in 1982. Surgery might be the only way to salvage her voice, according to the doctors, but there was no assurance that she would be able to sing the same. She decided to take a chance. She began to rediscover her voice after months of therapy, rehabilitation, and breathing exercises. She had a preference for jazz and classics music, and published Torch in 1981. On the Billboard 200, it rose at number 23. It wasn't about following trends with that record. It has to do with recovery. With less pop gloss and more maturity, she discovered a new way to engage her fans. It served as a reminder to her that reinvention might be subtle yet significant. Then followed the 1986 movie Heartburn, which starred Meryl Streep and included Carly and the Youre coming around again. On the Billboard Hot 100, it peaked at Music, number 18. However, there was a storm behind the song. In 1985, James Taylor had just overdosed and almost died. Carly was drawn back into the commotion for the benefit of their kids, despite the fact that they were no longer together. The pain of co-parenting was conveyed in that song. Even while everything felt shaky, she subsequently claimed that writing it helped her understand and forgive. The lyrics weren't intentionally beautiful. They were genuine. Carly released My Romance, a jazz and standards-heavy song, in 1989, when synth-pop dominated the radio. At number 46, it peaked. She was no longer after hits, but it wasn't a chartbuster either. The change in fashion reflected her inner turmoil. She was depressed. She felt left behind since the industry had evolved. Later, in an effort to overcome that darkness, she talked candidly about undergoing electroshock treatment. Her career wasn't saved by the album, but it offered her something to cling to as she regained her feet. It demonstrated that she wasn't scared to change course when no one else was looking. Have You Recently Seen Me in 1990? Her 15th studio album was released. After further heartbreak and the gradual disintegration of another love story, it occurred during a midlife reckoning. The album peaked at number 60 and was on the Billboard 200 for 32 weeks. Better Not Tell Her was her biggest hit of that decade and peaked at number 4 on the adult contemporary chart. Everyone could see she was writing from genuine pain, and the words alluded to betrayal. A song that was intended for the film Postcards from the Edge was cut. Nevertheless, she was nominated for a 1991 BAFTA for the film's score. Her songs, according to critics, sounded as though she was confronting her reflection for the first time. Without filters. She was no longer acting. A tumor in her breast grew significantly larger in October 1997. After receiving a cancer diagnosis, Carly had to make the difficult choice to undergo chemotherapy and a double mastectomy. She didn't hide it, instead, she made it public. Her candor encouraged others to be looked out as well. She worked on a noir movie during that period, which debuted that year and peaked at number 54. She turned to music as medicine. She claimed that although the employment kept her grounded, she experienced sadness during chemotherapy. It made it easier for her to relate to other people who were in pain. She never stopped discussing it. She then produced the Bedroom Tapes in 2000. It was taped at home with her daughter, Sally Taylor, and was unvarnished and personal. It only made it to number 92, but it contained tales she had never shared before, such as surviving an attack. The sessions were emotional, dirty, and therapeutic. Making music with her mother, according to Sally, aided in their recovery. One of the tracks sounded like a dialogue between hope and trauma. Polish was ignored by critics. The bravery in her voice was evident to them. Reflections, a 20-track greatest hits album released in 2004, peaked at number 22 on the charts and earned gold in 2007 after selling more than 500,000 copies in the US. It featured updated renditions of beloved songs, such as You're So Vain. As a tribute to her father, a former book publisher, Carly donated the earnings to reading initiatives. The album received a BPI Gold certification and sold over 100,000 copies in the UK. It went beyond a simple retrospective. There was a message. She had continued to give and create. She appeared on the Olympic stage in Athens that same year. She briefly faltered during her performance but managed to catch herself. She then did the rest flawlessly. It was strong, but it wasn't flawless. She released another album of jazz standards, Moonlight Serenade, in 2005. Her 14th Grammy nomination resulted from it. The critics respected her voice because they could see how it had deepened and aged. She withdrew after her marriage dissolved in 2007. After retreating to Martha's Vineyard, she began creating children's books and music. 100,000 copies of her first Midnight Farm were sold when it was released in 1997. She now sought solace in that world. Her tales were gentle, introspective, and connected to healing in the natural world. They assisted her in rebuilding and grieving, she claimed. She finally stated it out in 2015 when promoting Boys in the Trees, her memoir. Warren Beatty was the subject of the second verse of You're So Vain. For decades, fans had been speculating. In fact, Beatty had made jokes about it. Only that portion of the song's mystery was confirmed by her. For admirers who had been trying to solve that mystery since 1972, the revelation introduced a new chapter while also closing the previous one. Then 2020 arrived. Carly recorded Singer, a covers album of Jimmy Webb songs, while the world was shut down in the early days of CO. It peaked at number 84. Easy for You to Say was a really powerful song. She had to think back on her lengthy career and previous relationships, particularly with James Taylor, as a result of the epidemic. The muted sound complemented the lockdown's quiet. It helped her make sense of her entire life. Her life on Martha's Vineyard served as the basis for a new memoir that she published in 2023. It discussed grief, the death of her brothers, and the wounds from the cancer battle. But once more, she had been saved by music. Over 25 million albums had been sold by her. She was now narrating the song's backstory. She then received the Gershwin Prize in 2024. After decades, she was standing next to James Taylor once more. More than 5 million people watched their duet. It was more than sentimentality. Reconciliation was the goal. In addition to being a singer, she felt viewed that night as someone who had persevered through all types of flames and still had a voice.